Good evening. I would like to call to order the Kaiser Long Range Planning Task Force. It is Monday, February 12th, 2024. And let's go ahead and call roll.
Matthew Stallum.
Say again.
Matthew Stallum.
Present.
Okay. Melissa Martin.
Here.
Elaine Wilson.
Here.
Jane Erb.
Here.
Lori Christopher.
Here.
Susan London.
Here.
Jonathan Thompson.
Here.
Mayor Clark.
Here.
Council President Starr.
Here.
Councilor Reed.
Here.
Councilor Duran.
Here.
Councilor Cross.
Here.
Councilor Hessman.
Here.
Councilor Kohler.
Here.
Thank you very much. The first order of business is approval of the minutes from March 2023. Were there any additions or corrections anyone wish to note at this time? Motion to approve as presented.
I move that we approve the minutes of the March 2023 Long Range Planning Task Force meeting.
Second.
Approval of the minutes has been moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed signify by saying no. Hearing no objection, motion passes unanimously. Let's go then to the appearance of interested citizens. And we do have, for the record, the written comments that were submitted to the January 2nd, 2024 City Council meeting from Ms. Marlene Parsons and from Ms. Amy Ryan Corser. And from Mr. Dick Withnell. So those all three were submitted in written comment. And do we have anybody signed up for public comment at this time?
No, Mayor.
All right, thank you very much. Is there anyone here who would like to address the task force? No, I know this is not a council meeting, but people have come here tonight. And if somebody has something they would like to bring to our attention, I would welcome that at this time. All right. Let's go to the presentation from our staff for the fiscal year 2023-24. This goes to Mr. Brown and Mr. Wood. All right.
Well, thank you everyone for coming out tonight. I was just looking at the minutes and realized that you guys took a month from me. So last year we did this like the second week in March. So if some of the numbers don't look quite as polished, that's probably why, although I was also out all last week riding the COVID Express. So I'm glad to be back here. But anyway, so purpose of tonight's meeting is to give you a little bit of a look into the city's financial area in anticipation of the upcoming budget process. So we're going to start with looking at a citywide overview. And then once we're done with that, we'll look at the general operating fund. That is the primary operating fund of the city that includes things like police, parks, municipal court, those types of things. Then we'll take a quick look at the city's utilities, specifically the water system and the stormwater system. And then we'll have a time for questions. We are breaking this up into 2 meetings this year. Hopefully we can get through the majority of this stuff tonight. If we can't, some of this stuff may carry over to the next meeting. At the next meeting, we'll also look at some of our ARPA funds, in addition to some of the more other type of expense kind of items. So with that, page 3 of the presentation, this is really a big, broad picture look at the city overall. This financial statement comes from our audited financial statements. We just wrapped those up at the end of December, so this may be the first time that some of you folks have taken a peek at this. Really, the main message that I want to convey here is the city is broken into 2 parts. We have what we call our governmental activities. That's our police department, again, parks, municipal court, general administration, those kind of things. Those are the first 2 columns where you can compare 2023 to 22. The middle columns are the business type activities. Those are parts of the city that we try to run similar to a business, although not with a profit motive, but with the motive of continuing to maintain sustainability into the future. So we don't want to necessarily cut costs in our water system, only to have it go bankrupt and not be able to provide water in 5 years. That would not go well for any of us. Then you can see the last two columns are the totals of the entire city combined. The important thing to look at is towards the bottom, the third line from the bottom, the change in net position. This is really a sign of the city's overall health. So if we see positive numbers here, this would be similar to a positive net income in a business. That means the city is growing, it's financially stable. If you were to see negative signs here, that would mean that the city's kind of going the wrong direction. We're using up a lot of our resources and we're spending more than we're actually taking in. So the good news is for both the governmental activities and also the business activities, we're in pretty good shape as far as the ending balance goes. Our change in position is positive. We're adding to our bottom line. We're maintaining our stability over the long run. And that's definitely a positive for the city. So when we start looking at, okay, what's made up in that ending fund balance, the first pie chart on the left, you can see that our ending fund balance and contingency is about 22%. That's the money that we stockpile and carry us from one year to the next until we receive our property tax money. Or it's a 60-day supply of cash that we keep in our utilities, just as an emergency reserve in case something goes sideways on us. It gives us an opportunity to respond without having to do anything really catastrophic. Next piece is our enterprise funds, which make up 34%. So those are the water utilities, sewer. This is artificially large for the city of Kaiser because, as many of you know, we don't really manage a sewer system. We take money in, we push money over to Salem, who does all of the operations for the sewer. So that's a little bit larger than what it would normally be had we not had that type of an arrangement with Salem. The general fund makes up about 20% of our overall fund balance, and that's the area where we have the most issues. So when we look at the city, really only 20% of our city has a problem. That's overall, I would say, fairly good. And our problems in our general fund are very similar to any other city that you would encounter throughout the state of Oregon. To the right, when we look at, okay, what are the expenses that make up the city? Vast majority, 43%, is personal services. So that's payroll related, police officers, utility workers, administration workers, those kinds of things. The next biggest piece is materials and services at 36%. And again, this is artificially high because we do have a large payment of about $6 million that goes to the city of Salem for sewer services. And we have a little bit of capital outlay, 16%. That's us reinvesting into our utilities. It's investments in our parks, police vehicles. Those are the biggest pieces. And then we have a little bit of debt, about 5%. So that is really the composition citywide of the expenses for the city. And feel free, if you have any questions, to just go ahead and shoot them out at me at any given time. Okay.
No questions at this point? All right, following the bouncing ball. Okay.
So moving on to page 5, one of the biggest things that really impacts the city financially is overall growth of the city. So we can look at population growth. Over the last 10 years, we've grown really less than 1% every year. And you can see in 2023, we actually had a decrease. Typically, I think what we're seeing is a reaction to the census data. So maybe we had a lot of people sleeping over whenever they were doing their count, and now we're kind of adjusting back to where we should have been at some point in time. I guess the biggest thing here to realize is for the city of Kaiser, if you build it, they will come. The years where we had large increases in population, those coincided with large retirement homes being constructed, large apartment complexes, subdivisions being built out. So to the extent that we have new construction, development, that kind of a thing, the population tends to gravitate here. Unfortunately, having said that, we don't have a lot of available land, which is not news to any of you. So that's really putting pressure, downward pressure on a lot of our revenues, specifically property taxes, franchise fees, anything that's based off of the city's per capita allocation. So that also impacts some intergovernmental revenues. Right now, the Kaiser is the 15th largest city in Oregon.
I'm gonna editorialize that a little bit. I don't trust the numbers that we got this year. All we've seen from a city standpoint is densification of when things are going down, they're being built back up more dense. But we don't get to choose these numbers, unfortunately. This comes from the Portland State University is the Census Bureau's, what they rely on for forecast numbers. So I was shocked when I saw that go down, and I'm not sure that I agree with it, but my opinion really doesn't matter on this subject. But it is important because our revenue sharing numbers from the state are based on per capita count. So to the extent that that's wrong, it hurts us.
Any questions on that? I'll go to Councilor Reed and then to Ms. Christopher.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So just kind of tangential to this, are we still at about a 1% occupancy in terms of our available rentals and?
Yeah, it's surely less than 5%, which is a 2-week occupancy vacancy rate. So
Okay, so.
it's way less than 5%.
So the vacant, okay, so that's, you know, that seems to corroborate your assessment that these numbers are not quite right, if we are still maintaining that kind of vacancy rates. Okay, thanks.
Ms. Christopher?
So these numbers were as of when?
They're as of July 1st. July 1st.
So can we appeal? Can we ask for adjustment? What can be done to get more accurate figures?
I don't know. I'll ask. You know, actually, I felt like they were pretty good in the city I was working for before here, that they were more accurate than other forecasts. But, so I was surprised when I came here and found it. And they may be growing on a zero-sum base growth. So seeing other places grow, they're gonna, you know, depending on something. I'm not sure, but I'll ask.
And then we'll know what we can do.
Yeah. Yep.
Thank you. Any other questions? And I do have one. So for coming into 2024, if we're going to get new numbers around July 1, knowing that we've got more multifamily, we have more infill, there's been a lot more construction this year. Will that be, do you expect that to be reflected in the new Portland State numbers?
I would anticipate yes.
Okay.
So to clarify, the numbers are as of July 1st. We typically don't see them until about October-ish.
Oh, okay. So there was, well, I guess that's fast in statistical time. Okay. All right.
Okay. The next area, obviously with 43% of the city being payroll costs, citywide staffing is one of the biggest things that we need to keep our eye on. The big chart, budget to actual full-time equivalents, this is going back through time and saying, okay, every year we budgeted a certain number of positions. How many do we actually get to fill? We may be able to budget it, but if the revenues don't come in to support it, we unfortunately aren't able to fill everything we have. Since I've been around in 2009, I think we had about 1 week where we were actually fully staffed, and then someone resigned, and it kind of went south from there. Typically, we're 4 to 5 positions short of being fully staffed at any given time. You can kind of see through this chart during the COVID times of 1920 and 2021, we had a fairly large drop. That was the result of closing our event center for about 1.5 years, 2 years. So you're seeing that kind of skew some of these results. As we move into closer times, you can actually see we're getting close to the 100 employee mark on a relatively consistent basis. We are still about 2 to 3 positions down, although we have a few recruitments in the works. But full staff is always a struggle because we can only support so many people with the revenues that we have. And unfortunately, we gotta, for those that have been around for a long, long time, part of the spread also is when someone would resign, if they had 400 hours of vacation saved up, we couldn't hire someone until we worked through that 400 hours of time. So there would be a 4 or 5, could be a several month delay until we were able to actually backfill a position, just because we don't have the budgeted resources to be able to do that. So we're working on that, and we're getting a lot closer. You can see the spread is getting a little bit smaller between the budget to actual number of employees. One of the things I am excited to see is the actual age of our workforce has gotten about 0.7 years higher. So we had a fair amount of turnover the last couple of years. The folks that we do have now are sticking around. So, you know, years gone by and we've added 0.7 to the average age of service. So in 23, 24, the average age was about 11.62, and 22, 23, it was 10.92. So we're getting a little bit more experienced workforce, which I think is good for the city.
Any questions on the staffing levels, especially, sorry, the taking out the variation that happened during the COVID years? Are we going to be seeing the conversation around that, the funding for the gap between outgoing and incoming employees in our ARPA conversation?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. Thank you. So put a pin in that one for 2 weeks from now. Anything else? Okay.
The other item is obviously the cost of living increases that the city experiences. Unlike a business where that, you know, they can do a profit sharing of some kind or, you know, base compensation off of that, the city really doesn't have a way of pegging compensation to anything. So we try to really take a look at the comparable agencies around us, as well as the cost of living increases from CPIs that we look at. So you can see in the chart, I hope I don't fade on you. So on the chart, you can see that we're kind of coming out of a hyperinflation kind of period. During 2021, there was a 5.5%.
Take your time.
Carry on.
Yeah, the hyperinflation is difficult to keep up with, especially with the effects of Measure 5 and Measure 50. And the unions get the benefit of being able to bargain those and a little bit more maybe reflective of what's happening in the real market. So we're always running a little bit behind with the non-reps. So, and the councils had a few presentations, discussed that and over the last couple weeks. So. Okay, so we do have a policy where every 4 years we do salary and wage study. And that was, let's see, did I jump slide? No, sorry. Okay, we'll cover that. Okay, so PERS. We are part of the Public Employee Retirement System, and the decision made far back was that we would do that in lieu of contributing to Social Security. So that's something that our employees know when they come on board, and that it's repeated. The PERS actuarial calculations are done on a biennial basis. So every 2 years, we get rates for the next 2 years. They do an interim rate, which is called the advisory rate. And so the last one we got, which is for the next biennium of 2025, is these are broken down by tiers. So tier 1, tier 2, and the OPSORP. So 35.7%, 30%, 30.46%, and 25.87%, which is a pretty big increase. And this does not reflect the other issue that we have with PERS, with the accounting issue that we've had over the last 30 years that we're now trying to fix. So you may have read that about that in the paper. That's something that's just come to the forefront over the last year. So, any questions on the PERS rates?
Questions on PERS? Ms. Christopher?
So the 35.70, that's tier 1, 3 is 2, and 2587 is OPSERV?
Yeah, actually, I think the same rate is for tier 1, tier 2 is 35.4. The OPSORP police and fire is the 30.46,
Okay.
and then the OPSORP general is 25.87.
Okay, and then
Yep.
another question, isn't there, I can't remember, isn't there another savings plan that we went with, not PERS, but an additional savings plan that the city invested in rather than Social Security? It wasn't PERS instead of Social Security. It
You're
was-
right.
Okay,
Yep, it's a 457 plan.
and that was instead of.
That was instead of Social Security, yeah.
not PERS, okay. So it's that plus PERS.
Yep,
Thank you.
yep. Thank you for correcting me of that.
Yep. We'll have to correct that on that slide going forward to add that in. Anything else on the PERS rates? One of the pieces of news that we got earlier this year was that, or I guess it was late last year, was that the state performance on PERS was, I'm gonna be kind, lackluster. So one of the big jumps that we're seeing here from the 22-23 was 515,000, for example, for tier 1, tier 2, and then our cost 23-24 estimate is $731,000. Big jump. So when they are lackluster, who ends up carrying the bag on that one? I believe it's us.
Yeah, we do, yeah.
Okay. So just want to point out there that we've got a total expense that jumped significantly because of the state PERS performance with those funds. So we've got to carry, we get to carry that expense.
Yeah.
Mr. Thompson?
At the risk of being overly political, I know there's another bill before the legislature this session to dictate to the PERS board how they should invest for, I'll be kind, political reasons. And it might be great if some cities would weigh in and say, knock it off, because this is the real world impact of you guys playing social engineer with our PERS money.
So if we could, offline, Mr. Thompson, would you get me that bill information so we can consult with council on appropriate response from the city of Kaiser?
Yeah, that's all we need.
Thank you for that. I've been tracking other bills and this had not yet, hit my inbox. So thank you for that. Anything else on the impact, the significant impact of PERS on our general fund? Okay.
Want to keep going, or you?
Yeah, I can keep going.
Moving on to
So
health
health
insurance.
insurance. We've actually been fortunate the last couple years. You see that 1%, 0.3% growth in healthcare inflation. That's really, really good. We don't have the same type of plan that most of our peers have. They go with the county city insurance services, CIS. We have different plans. We have Kaiser, we have also, was that HealthNet? So we have the different plans that we've brokered with a third-party agency to save us money and our employees money. But this is probably a truing up year with a 5% growth. Even a 5% growth, that was considered normal and expected annually. So this what we see coming this year is a 5.5% growth on the health insurance.
Thank you. Ms. Christopher?
So, sorry, so Mr. Brown, this year though, are we going with CIS or staying?
It's still in our interest to stay with the carriers that we have.
So you come here on an annual basis?
Not annually. Well, I don't know.
Yeah, she does.
You do? Okay, yeah. I guess we do.
So at any time, whichever one was the most cost effective, we could change.
You could, and I've been places where we changed opt insurance every year if it had meant, you know,
Okay.
the savings. So,
If I remember correctly from past years and presentations before this body and budget, this is something that our Human Resources Department goes out and is very aggressive in looking for good value for the employees and for the city budget. If I remember that correctly, Mr. Pina's not here to talk about that, but maybe at the next meeting, we could get at least some information back on the process that HR uses each year to get those numbers and the value for the employees.
yeah, we see the, I believe it's the end of February that the CIS releases their numbers, so we're able to see the increases that they're looking at every year.
Okay. So you're saying because we're early this year, we might have to wait for those numbers?
Yeah, we probably will know by the next meeting what their rates are.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Martin?
So for the next, or I'm sorry, for the next meeting though, we'll be able to see the difference between what CIS is coming out with and what we're paying currently?
Yeah, well, by the next meeting, we'll see what their rate increase is and be able to compare that to it, but we're still, our plans are still under
Contract.
theirs, or under their cost of CIS's plans, so we would, even if they have a 6% versus our 5%, we need to do the math to see if that's still better than what we have. So.
Ms. Christopher, follow-up?
So is this, so the 5.1%, that's not a hard number, that's an anticipated, we'll know in 2 weeks what the real number is? Or is this real?
That is an estimated number. So you're going to see a little bit of change in here, especially if employees change plans. So if someone gets married, doesn't get married, has kids, kids move out, that kind of a thing. So to the extent that they move around in the plans, that's also going to impact some of the costs. So right now, we are seeing an increase in more families coming on board, especially with the younger workforce.
Okay. All right. Good.
I'll take it back over. All right.
We'll give it a try.
Okay.
So going a little bit more granular, our general operating fund, or our general fund, this is kind of the junk drawer for cities. This is where everything goes that isn't specifically accounted for somewhere else. So here we have our police department, municipal court, planning, parks, also general government. As you can see by the chart, the police department makes up the vast majority of the entire fund, 66% roughly. Everything else kind of dwarfs in comparison to that. The general fund is also our most constrained fund. You can see the dance between the revenues and expenditures. Typically, there's not much of a spread, so we basically spend what we get.
You can see in the 23-24 year, we're upside down with the revenues under the expenditures. But that is why we have a fund balance. that, to smooth those years out. There's also the spike that you see on the separation in 2021 is due to the CARES Act funding.
Ms. Christopher?
So just to clarify, we've got contingency, so even though it shows that our projected expenditures are less than our projected revenues, we're okay because we have a contingency fund that will get us through.
Yeah, and I think you meant to say our projected expenditures are over our,
Yes.
yeah, yep, you are correct. Yep. It's a rainy day
Yeah.
fund.
We've had some rain,
Mm-hmm.
indeed.
So the next slide is the picture of our general fund operating resources. You see them stacked on top of each other with the taxes at the bottom, the big blue shade at the bottom. I don't know if that's McNary blue, it should be. But then the license and fees are our next biggest source, and then intergovernmental. And then in 2016, you can see that mustard yellow color is the implementation of the police and park fees. And
Good to have a question, Counselor Kohler?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can you give us an example of what some of the licenses and fees are that we do collect?
Sure, the license and fees, those are typically all the franchise fees. So Comcast, Northwest Natural.
Follow up?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So that, Mr. Wood, then, what most people think of licensing fees, they think of like a business license and parks, license to do, all these other kind of things really don't apply to what this is. That we're talking pretty much utility licensing, is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Thank you very much.
Okay, anything else on the resources? Just one question, fines and forfeitures, that's the very top band of dark blue, is that correct? Or is that miscellaneous at the top? Oh, yep, that is, okay,
yeah, the other one, they're generally in the order, so that one's the little thicker blue band at the top,
okay.
fines and forfeitures.
And that tends to be not terribly large. That's something that the city of Kaiser has worked hard over pretty much the life of the city to use fines and forfeitures, especially when they come to our municipal court, not as a revenue generator, but as an educational opportunity. I'm looking at our chief, but also many of us have had the opportunity to observe Judge Meyer, who does a great job of working with people who get ticketed in this town toward compliance. So I just want to point out, some people look at fines and forfeitures as a revenue stream, and, but our municipal judge for a very, very long time with our police department has used them for, except in some of the egregious cases of drug houses and so forth, have used them for educational purposes. I'd invite Chief, if that's right, with Mr. Brown, to comment on that.
Yeah.
If you have anything to add.
I think you have it right. We like to educate rather than enforce. Seems to get along better with the public. But we do have a traffic team, and they do write more warnings than they do citations. We have those numbers. I didn't bring them tonight, but
Okay.
Yeah, I would say that if we were policing for profit, we were not doing a very good job. So.
Thank you. Ms. Christopher has a question.
Revenue sharing, is that governmental, or where's revenue sharing? Yes, it is, okay.
Okay. Ms. Erb?
Thank you, Mayor Clark. Going back to the licenses and fees with utilities, how is it determined how much money from those bills that our people, that all of us pay, come to Kaiser?
Some of them are set by statute. And then I would say the standard for most cities in the state is around 7% for the ones that aren't set by standard, by statute.
Do we have influence on that? I mean, we just saw this 18% increase in our PGE bill, so I'm just wondering how much did that come to Kaiser? How much did we have influence on that fee, that increase?
Yeah, we didn't have any influence on the increase that has to go through the Public Utility Commission. That will generate, we'll see 7% of that 18% increase in the form of utility franchise fees. So, yes, I think that was something I know was definitely brought to my attention in my household. And a lot more lights are shut off in my house last week, so, yeah.
Sir, that's a great question. And Councilor Kohler, we're going to be doing work sessions later this year, talking about right-of-way and franchise to continue a conversation that was begun over the last couple of years to understand how that is structured. And so stay tuned for that as we work through some of these very complicated issues, some of which over which we have control, and the Public Utility Commission, I believe we have none. Not that we don't want to. All right, anything else on the resources? All right.
Yeah, that was a real tough one to swallow. And we saw it coming too, but even with that, it was,
I'm sorry.
when it hits your bill, you notice it. So, looking at property taxes, there's some really good data in here. This is a longitudinal number about the levy for each $1,000 of assessed value. So one of the things to draw your attention to is that red bar is what the real market value is. And the bars underneath will show you that we don't collect what the real market value is, taxation on the real market value. There's a taxable value is what we collect on, and there's some big difference. I think the numbers on the next page by class.
Not necessarily by class. The other big thing to notice here is Kaiser is by and large primarily residential. We have a little bit of commercial, but no industrial. That makes a big difference when you decide what kind of services the city has to provide. Residential tend to be more service intensive than, say, industrial properties.
The tax rate, the levy of $2.08 and 38 1/1000ths, I think, is I would say probably half of what the state average is, just to give you a place of magnitude of order. Most cities, if the average would be around 4 to 5%. I've seen some as high as 7%. But so we have a very low tax rate. It's not the lowest in the state, but it is in the bottom 5.
Council President Starr?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Brown, I think you alluded to it when you talked about the market value versus the taxable value. Can you explain, and I know I'm going to ask a very fun question, but can you give us like a 101 30-second primer on Measure 50 and maybe some examples of what that looks like in terms of new residential construction back to us in the form of property taxes and amounts?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. So
I can move forward a few slides.
okay, is it
Did I
there?
jump ahead? I'm sorry. I got so excited talking about Measure 50 and property
Is that where
taxes.
the numbers are for the?
Yeah.
Okay, so Measure 5 in 1990,
Oh, sorry.
limited.
You can push pause on me if you want to go through your slides. I'm sorry.
Let's just,
I
let's
just got
hit it while
excited
we're
for a
back. We might
minute.
go back to slide 14, but while we're there. So it set these caps at general government and schools. So we fall into the general government. With that would also be your fire districts, in our case, the county. All of our general government rates do fall under the 10. We're at, you can see on the right side of slide 15, 7.99 cents per $1,000 of assessed value. What happens is if that number gets all those numbers, the library, the transit district, soil and water, Kaiser Fire, Marion County, all those get to above 10, then they're all equally compressed or proportionally compressed till they get to 10, so that the taxpayer never pays more than $10 per assessed value. So that is Measure 5. And the same thing occurs for the schools. They also have overlap. They are in compression. You see the 3 there, they're come to 571. And so the schools are compressed proportionally to get down to $5. So that's Measure 5.
Any questions on that before we hit the joys of 50? Okay,
Yeah, so if that wasn't good enough in 1990, 1997, through a couple bills that started in 95, the Measure 50 froze the tax rates at the level that they were at that time. And so the city of Kaiser's tax rate was at $2.0838, and that is what is frozen in perpetuity. So you have, regardless of, hey, we've always been really efficient in Kaiser, and it's a great attribute, and but it does make things very difficult. Let me just jump ahead. So that's Measure 50. And let me see, did I miss anything on? Oh, so the growth was also limited by Measure 50 to either 3% or the appreciation, the lesser of the two items. So there's now 3 different things we have, or 4 different things. We have the general government and the school government tax caps. We have the compression, then we have Measure 50, we have the frozen tax rates, and then the 4th thing is the restricted growth at 3, or the cost of living, the lesser of the 2, so. It makes careers for mathematicians is what this does.
So
And
on
then-
page 16,
oh, there's a question on page 16, Ms. Christopher. No, is that where you were at?
I don't know, 15 or 16. So when you and I were talking, Tim, something I didn't know. So if I build a house today, and that house is built for $500,000, that is not what that house is assessed at, even though it's brand new and I just bought it for $500,000. It's not the 3% that have been accumulating over the years. And that's a formula, correct? Stop me if I'm wrong.
That's-
That's a formula that is determined by Marion County.
that is correct.
That's page 17.
Page 17.
Okay.
So I was just
So
going to say, while
you
we're
and
on,
Council President Starr are
while we're on
anticipating
page
this next thing.
16, just as far as the budget process goes, this is the mathematical formula that I use to calculate our property taxes. This is about as basic as it gets. There's not a lot of magic to it, and unfortunately, it's one of the larger numbers in our budget document. And this is it. This is the formula for how we do it. We take the assessed value times the permanent tax rate, and then we subtract out a little bit of uncollectible and early payment discounts, and we get to our net revenues. We used to play a little bit adding in some of the additional property permit values throughout the year that happens for the new construction, but really it's not significant enough to really even bother with at this point. But we can move on to page 17 and see some exciting examples.
And this gets to the whole thing about the formula-based reduction of new construction real market value. And this is something that's done statewide under Measure 50. So, yeah, no, this is not Marion County saying this is what we're going to do. This is a this is from Measure 50. So I'll turn it back over to the people who understand how this
So
works.
those numbers are in, on row 3, change in the property ratio. That's probably the most important thing you could take away from this discussion, is for a residential home, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, the real market value, according to Zillow and any other online one in the assessor's office, is going to put it at $490,000. The fifth whack of all these measures is that new properties don't come on at the real market value. They are approximated by all the development that surrounds them and the taxation that surrounds them. So we have been watching this apartment complex come up with, I think, 112 units. The estimated value there's $18.9 million of improvements there on Verda Lane, where Rosalie's cows are. And we will pay 41%, that complex will be taxed at 41% of the market value. That apartment complex will be taxed at 41% of the market value. So the city will see $16,208 a year for all 112 units of that complex. For a residential house, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, we're at just under 51% of a new construction. A new house is built, and it's worth $490,000. It's going to be taxed at 51%. So we'd see $500 a year for it.
So I really, this slide is so important because quite frankly, I was not fully aware of this change property ratio formula. I really didn't understand it until we started really hearing about it through our colleagues from across the state that were coming up against this time and time again, going, why is new construction not coming on our tax rolls at the new construction value? This is something that is calculated by assessors across the state as per Measure 50. And finally began to understand it. There's some people I know who are very smart economist types, and even they did the math and it made their heads explode. So this slide really needs to sink in. This is part of what we've been up against, and quite frankly, I'm not sure that there was a really clear understanding of what Measure 50 was doing in this fifth whack at our ability to collect property taxes at a reasonable rate to fund local services. Councilor Reed.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And just to put that in perspective, so with 180 units, that's, or 108?
112.
112, that's, 224 people, more or less, that will need water and police and parks and all of those other services that we provide. So we have more and more people moving in, and so our services are being stretched more and more.
Yeah.
So just to kind of put that other piece on that.
So here's, I mean, I'm just kind of, it's just I don't know who made the decision as to why apartment complexes are at a rate of 40% and residential residents who pay, a much larger portion, it affects them. They're paying 51% in property tax rate. How is that assessed? Just
So, yeah, this is formulaic, and this is, like I said, this economist that I know made his head explode. this is that kind of formulaic complexity that is used with the county assessors to come up with these numbers. So this is not something that Mr. Brown or Mr. Wood does. This is something that is done through the tax assessors and how they implement Measure 50 statewide. And I'll let Mr. Brown and Mr. Wood get it more correct than me.
They try to triangulate, just like a Realtor would do, when they're looking at comps. That's essentially what they do at the county level is what are the sale prices, what are the values, the taxable values around that new construction? And then it's applied to the value of the improvements. Did I state that?
That's correct.
But it's the same thing. Councilor Kohler has a question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Is this calculated the same way on commercial properties or industrial lands?
That is correct. It's a different CPI or change property ratio, but yeah, still the same process.
Yeah. Ms. London? Go and pull up the microphone if you would, please.
How often do you reassess property? Or,
The county does the assessments every year. It changes, but it's not done individually. It's typically done in mass based on actual sales. So it's, the property value will change every year based on the local.
well, I see that, am I not on this?
Yeah, you're.
I see that in my tax bill every year, that it goes up, what, 3% or something, the assessed value. But when you do major improvements and everything, shouldn't that change the assessed value of the home?
It would, yeah. If you went through the county permitting process and they were aware of your improvements to your the value of your home, it would, in the value of it, the real market value would change. Your taxable value would change according to this property ratio.
Because I'm doing some major work on my home, and I just want to know if.
Stop, just stop.
Stop doing it, or just stop talking.
Just kidding.
And I know that they've put in for a permit for, the rest of it we've done, didn't need a permit, but this one does.
Yeah.
So I'm sure it's going to go up because
Well, you know, and that's the bright side of it, is there are already two sides of the coin.
my home
You're not
has
gonna be
more than
taxed at the
doubled in
full-
value, and I don't know that I want to
value.
see that, but
Right, yeah.
So that's a good question. So when the real market value goes up because of not just new construction, but remodeling and so forth, and we have experts on that subject here, some of us have lived through it, that changes the real market value, but isn't that also subject to the change property ratio? So again, it's not taxed at the full increase in the real market value. You still have a maximum increase of 3%, is that correct? Or some sort of ratio,
I think it would be the change property ratio.
the change
Yeah,
property
right.
ratio. So
Yeah.
again, if you increase your value by a certain amount, the change property ratio will bring it down to the assessed value by that formula. So it won't be the full amount, the real market value went up. It would be subject to the formula, the CPR formula, which gives us a heart attack every time we see how much the difference is.
Yeah.
You see it be about half, yeah. And then you get assessed that.
Yep.
So, and is anybody aware of any other state in the nation that does this? California's worse. Okay, good
Well,
to
I
know.
know,
They reset on sale, though.
a Midwest state I
We don't.
came from in Michigan also had a similar system, except that they allowed you to recapture, as the values went down, they actually allowed you to recapture it. So they still were pretty far between real market value, assessed value, taxable value. They still had all three, but there was an upside to it.
Okay. And then to the comment on California, I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe they have reset on sale. So over time, when properties change hands, it's brought up to the new market value and then taxed from there. Oregon does not have reset on sale.
We moved from Southern California to Oregon. And the house sold for well over double what we had paid for it. And their property taxes went up appreciably. With mortgage rates and that, their house payment was 4 times what ours was for the same house.
Yeah, that's reset on sale. Well, plus the increased value.
And that was after Prop 13 came in and locked everything down, so it was still pretty awful.
Right.
Eastern Oregon was much better.
This is very complicated, but this is something that I want to make sure we really brought to everybody's attention, because we've had many people come in and tell the city, well, you have all this new construction, so you should be good. This is why that the increase in the property tax line in our revenues has not reflected that. But quite frankly, I didn't get it, and I'm just beginning to understand it. So there's going to be some more good information out there. There's some links on the League of Oregon Cities website where they've been doing some presentations on this subject, really working with partners across the state. So I would encourage anybody, it's publicly available, to go and look and find out more. Anybody else on the joys of Measure 5 and 50? All right. With that delightful conversation, shall I go to page 18?
On page 18, we're looking at the license and fees. So to go back to that conversation, you can see the breakout, and we have electric, natural gas, telephone, cable, sanitation, water, sewer, and stormwater. Those are the major components that we have. And we collect 5% for all except for telephone, which is 7%. Overall, the fees have been growing about 3.5% per year. And that's primarily the result of electricity, water, sewer, and sanitation services. We're actually seeing a decrease in cable. Cable is dropping significantly. So as we go through time, that's going to be a less and less important franchise fee for us. I guess that's part of the cut the cord, especially as everyone has gone back to work now.
And I have another question.
Ms. London, yes.
Since the city does PGE for their electric, because I didn't see a huge increase, I'm Salem Electric. We have 2 companies here in Kaiser, because I wasn't given any choice. So why don't you go with one that's less expensive?
Yeah, those have defined service areas, so you don't have a choice between one or the other. Those service areas are set by the Public Utilities Commission. So.
Thank you.
That's a great question, because there is that question when people move here to find out which utilities services they will be, their house is served by, and it is set by, again, it's not by the city. So thank you for asking that question. People do wonder. So that was a great question. Anything else on the license and fees, franchise fees? All right, heading to page.
Moving on to page 19, intergovernmental revenues. These are revenues we get from federal, state, local grant opportunities, including the revenue share, or shared revenues. Primarily what we're really talking about is liquor taxes and cigarette taxes. You can kind of see with the chart that during the COVID years, we kind of peaked with the liquor sales, and we're kind of just now hovering, not really seeing much of an increase. Some of this does go back to the fact that the city isn't growing as fast as some of the other areas, so our per capita share of the revenue sharing is starting to drop a little bit. In addition, cigarette tax has pretty much dropped off the face of the planet here, so we're seeing that pretty much go away. I think we're down about almost 18% this year, which I think is good.
So we'll see that on another page. Councilor Reed.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So are there any kind of taxes on vaping, since that's kind of the new cigarette? Do we see any kind of revenue from those sales?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
All right, okay. Do you happen to know if they're regulated by the state, the same boards as these others?
That would be a good question. I'm not,
Okay.
I would anticipate that we probably would have seen a spike in our cigarette taxes had they been part of that, but.
Okay. Thank you.
So, yeah, if you could follow up on that, to see if vaping, who does that regulation and what that looks like? Okay, oh, and Ms. Christopher,
What about pot? Where's pot?
stay tuned. It has a different name.
We're not allowed to talk about pot.
Yeah.
I have to sign a secrecy thing every year that we're not supposed to talk about it, so we call it sales tax.
We call
Yeah.
it what?
Sales, we call it sales tax,
It is
yeah.
a sales tax.
It's the city's only real sales tax.
Who says we can't?
Correct.
Because of federal,
Ms. Wilson, yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't have voice. Is it because it's not recognized by the federal government?
Not exactly. It deals with the tax filings through the state. So if you have a lot of vendors within the city, a lot of pot shops, you're more able to talk about them because you won't be giving off any individually identifying information. Given the city of Kaiser, we only have 4 locations. If we talk too much about what's going on, we're potentially at risk of giving away some of their tax information.
Oh, okay.
So that's the biggest reason I get to sign a secrecy thing, and it's really fun. I get out my good pen when I do that.
That was a great question though, and thank you for that.
So moving on to the general operating fund expenditures, you can see, again, vast majority is personal services at about 75%. Then we have some materials and services, and that's primarily fees that we pay to Willamette Valley Communications Center. That's the single largest item that we have. And then a little bit of capital outlay as we talk about police vehicles and a little bit of park vehicles as well.
In that Willamette Valley Communications Center is 911.
Before we go to the expenditures, to the question that we were just discussing on the sales tax, where was that in the revenue side? Because that does go into general fund, correct?
It does. We typically lump that in with taxes and assessments.
Okay. So that's where it lived. And if we're scrolling back to taxes and assessments,
You probably won't necessarily see it broken out since it's not part of the property taxes itself.
gotcha.
But, you know, the dollar amounts have shrunk significantly with Measure 110. Previously, we were looking in the $250,000 range, and now we're down to about the $140,000 range. So, while it's significant, it's not super significant as far as the operations of the city anymore. And
It still hurts.
it really does hurt when you look at that spread between 250 and 140. I mean, that's the cost of a law enforcement officer. I mean, I guess not anymore. It's part of a law enforcement officer cost, so.
Right.
And that monies could be specifically targeted for law enforcement prior to Measure 110. What's left of it can still be, but Measure 110 took 75% of the state revenue sharing money. Measure 110, which is the measure that legalized or decriminalized drugs, hard drugs, they took 75, it was, at that time, the state revenue sharing was 1.7% of the state sales tax was about 45 to $50 million. And they capped it at $11 million and said everything above $11 million will be going to a state program that's going to set up rehabilitation for drug offenders.
That was 110.
That was Measure
Bingo.
110. Yeah. And so that's roughly 75% of the revenue sharing that was coming back based on per capita and the number of stores you had was then taken in by the state.
So that's a change with this short session.
it is a topic of conversation because that's not seen, success
I would
to date.
I would, however, comment that the bill that's currently under consideration is not talking about returning the funds to the local jurisdictions. It's on restructuring the operation of Measure 110 around the level of offense and more details of that regard rather than the funding. The versions I've been seeing as we've been tracking, I've been working with our partners to track this with League of Oregon Cities and Representative Mannix, who is on the committee on this topic, addiction, and remind me of the task force. Anyway, been very much in conversation with Representative on how this is going to play out, and the particular bill right now will not return those funds to the local jurisdictions. It will just change how the program is administered. So that was a hit we took that was beyond the control of local jurisdictions, which is why our home rule charter is so very important. And when things like that get passed and remove those funds from local jurisdictions to be able to provide for public safety is something that we have to work hard to raise the awareness. So thank you for asking the question about Measure 110 and helping folks understand what this is and how it's impacted our city and people in our community. So please watch that bill, get your input to us as well as city councilors. So I'm sorry, I'm with all of you going, this is not helpful. But I'm going astray from the topic of our work session. So I will come back and we will talk expenditures. So box off.
So again, the vast majority of the expenditures for the general operating fund is personal services. As we look at the positions directly and indirectly supported by the general fund, again, you can see the vast majority is police. For 23-24, we're looking at about 47.4 people as part of that department. And you can see that, you know, the next closest is Parks at 4.4 employees. Where it gets interesting is in the indirect area, you have the finance, IT, city recorder. All of our salaries are allocated out to the different funds based off of a council-adopted methodology. So say in the finance department, majority of my salary is allocated out based off of revenues and expenses in each given fund. So to the extent that, you know, sewer is really high, more of my salary gets allocated to sewer as compared to stormwater. So that, within the finance area, there's actually 3 employees, but only about 1.56 of those employees are allocated to the general fund. Gets a little wonky, and you can see through time, police has really been kind of a slowly climbing up. We hit 22, 23, where we had about a week of full staffing, and then we're kind of slumping back down in 23, 24. You can also see the drop off in planning, where we went from really about 4 employees to 3-ish employees during 1920 and 2021. You can also see the impact of the reduction in force that we had in 2021 and 21-22 in the finance area. So we're slowly building back a lot of the capabilities that we had pre-COVID. It's just taken us a while to get there. So the materials and services, unfortunately, this is one of the areas where we are starting to see a pickup as far as the hyperinflation. So the 23-24 numbers, we're starting to see spike up a little bit. The majority of what is included in here really, though, is the 911 center. And as we've talked about before as a group, the 911 charges that you see on your cell phone bill and telephone bill aren't adequate to actually pay for the entire service. So the city really is picking up a large portion of that. And then capital outlay, as far as the general operating fund, really isn't a lot to talk about. Again, it's mostly police vehicles. We typically budget between 3 and 5 vehicles every year for the police department. In addition, occasionally there'll be a park vehicle kind of thing that we're looking at as well. So,
Any questions on the capital outlay? All right. Ms. Christopher, the question is, do lease or buy on the police vehicles? Chief?
Say that again?
Leasing or buying?
We are currently buying police cars. There's been lots of conversations going back and forth over the years. We used to lease cars on a 3-year basis, and it changed under the previous administration. So we have these ongoing conversations, but it was through Wireworks that we could lease them, and I don't think they have that plan anymore. So that option went away.
So a follow-up on that would be that there's ongoing cost analysis looking at those two options over time for the best performance of the vehicles, maintenance, as well as the, just the pure cost of lease versus buy. You include all of that in the analysis for these decisions? I'm looking at anyone who
Yeah,
wants to take that.
And, you
Potluck.
know, we've actually been looking at for the last 4 or 5 months, a lease option for non-police vehicles and working with Enterprise, who has a government program where we have an opportunity to perhaps benefit from the high cost of vehicles right now and the rates that we can get them through a larger purchase. So that's something we're slated to bring to the city council, I think, at the next meeting.
Thank you. Ms. Erb?
Thank you, Mayor Clark. This isn't a question, but just something that I have learned over the past several years. When we're looking at this, and for people who may think that the police budget is outsized compared to other departments, we have such a small budget, $2.08, compared to, I've seen Roseburg's number, they're like $8, you know, so we're almost, I thought your 50% number was high. I think we're more like 25%. And so we have very few departments and functions that we're supporting as a city. For example, we're not even supporting fire, that's a special district. And so yes, our police looks like it's oversized, but it's not oversized compared to other cities our size and what we need for our public safety. So probably everybody knows that, but I wanted to point that out because nobody did, and it seemed like an elephant in the room.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah, that's a good point, because the last city I worked for, fire was about 25% and police about 50%. And, you know, taking that out, it would look exactly like it does here at around 60%, 65%. So thanks for making that point.
Ms. Martin, and then, just real quick, Ms. Bissett, I think something he's plugged in. It's
Yeah,
saying, please
I
give me
needed
some
to make a
juice.
change here.
Okay, all right. Ms. Martin?
Yeah, I'm just looking at the projected beginning fund balances over the next 4 years. And I guess I'm a little bit concerned that I understand that we are operating with fewer revenues than our expenditures, but I'm seeing that our fund balance is going down every single year, our carryover. So how is the city looking at fixing this situation, I guess?
Welcome to long-range planning.
Sorry, we've got a technical thing going on with the screen. Okay, it's back on. So, yes, Mr. Wood.
So to answer your question, at least for the last 20 years that I'm aware of, we as a city have intentionally budgeted more in expenditures than we have in revenues coming in. And then we play a game every year of saying, okay, we're gonna save as much as we possibly can over the course of the year to make sure that our revenues and expenses line up. This is intentional so that we can provide as much services as possible to the community itself. It keeps a lot of pressure on me. If someone were to ask, it's the number one thing that keeps me up at night, if how are we gonna save, $500,000 every year? And unfortunately, some years it does really rely on not filling all of the positions that we have. So unfortunately, that's kind of where we're at. As we look at the long-range plan, you can see, yeah, that's consistent. As you look, we're typically try to spend, it looks like we're gonna be actually spending more than what we're taking in. But we're gonna have to go back, and through that year, we'll have to actively manage the revenues as they come in to say, yes, we can backfill a position, or no, we can't. So that's how we've done it for probably the last 20 years. I'd love to get to the point where we say, okay, this is your budget, and we expect you to spend all of it. I think that would be an amazing spot to be in.
I guess my main concern is when I see a fund balance of 1.76 million as opposed to 3.668, that's, a very large percentage less. And if we're spending we're $500,000 shy every year in terms of revenues and expenditures, that's going to go away real fast. I'm just expressing some concern as a citizen.
Mr. Stahlheim?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I apologize, this question is likely going to be abstract. And I would see how you would naturally want to allocate those extra funds in order to cover those unexpected circumstances. I just had a quick question here. Is our decline in our budget related to our land constriction? Being it is that we have inflation, the cost of things are going up, and we are a growth-based economy. We don't have many options as opposed to new things. Rather, are we limited to just changing things as opposed to creating things? Does that make sense?
Sure. No, I think you have an excellent question. I think the combination of Measure 5 and 50, they're great on the surface, but when you add hyperinflation in, all of a sudden things go a little sideways on you. When your cost of living is 1.5%, 2%, when your revenues increase 3%, you can absorb that, and over time you can save up enough in your war chest to do something interesting. When the hyperinflation is 8% and your cost of living is 4 to 5%, that's eating away at your ability to do something interesting in the future. So to the extent that we actually have more land to grow, yeah, we could push the problem out into the future a little bit, but it depends on what type of growth you're talking about, because some of the growth may actually require more services rather than being able to leverage the services we already have.
Thank you. One more thing. Is there any plans, and we don't have to go in depth obviously right now, but are there plans in the works looking at obviously doing with what we have here now, and we're trying to rework that? Because it just weighs on me. I feel like you're saying, it's on the wall, and so there's probably things in place, I'm hoping, that we're looking at reinventing.
Sure. We got a wide variety of things that are kind of in play. What I'm encouraged about is, in previous years, some of these numbers were 750,000 upside down. So the fact that we're getting closer to the $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 range tells me that we're slowly making the progress forward where hopefully this problem will be behind us at some point in time. But there are a few other things, we have properties that we're looking at leasing. We're looking at right-of-way ordinances versus franchise. We're looking at cost-cutting things, like Mr. Brown was talking about with the enterprise fleet management kind of a thing, ways that we can get, a few more pennies into the pot.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'll go to Ms. Christopher in just a sec. So two of our largest underfunded mandates, so looking at our financial projection, are PERS and the Mid-Willamette Valley Communications. So we get some money, and going back to the state regarding the Mid-Willamette Valley Communications, we all pay a fee on our cell phones, but that stopped paying the freight a long, long time ago, so that comes out of the general fund. And several years ago, the state began keeping the interest generated from those funds collected and began sweeping those into the Oregon Emergency Management Department. So those used to come back to the cities as part of your 911 allocation, and those, that does not come back anymore. The state sweeps those. Ms. Christopher?
So what did you use,
Microphone?
am I not on?
I don't, doesn't sound like it.
Hello?
Okay, maybe I heard
It
it
is?
wrong. Okay.
You're on.
It wasn't, okay.
So what did you use, Mr. Wood, on, for the projection? How much did you project inflation for those 5 years? How much a year?
We typically look at between 3 and 3.5%.
Is that what you used?
Correct.
Okay. All right, anything further?
As part of the general operating fund, there's also the park component. We're required by the resolution to take a look at this every year, and the legal department likes it when I say that. So for the upcoming few years, there's still a lot of moving parts. Budgeting process is just beginning. We're still looking at the capital outlay plan. But at least in the near future, we're not anticipating any price increases for the park service fee. We're gonna keep it at $4 per month for non-residential, $3.45 per month for multifamily dwellings. We do have age-related and low-income discounts available. We did see a spike in those when the sanitation folks jumped on the bandwagon and started offering discounts there as well. So at this point, we're not anticipating really having to do much with the fee, at least till 25, 26. And again, this is going to be subject to what we come up with the capital outlay plan into the future. Right now, we're about 5 years out from when the fee was initially adopted. We have taken care of quite a bit of the initial work items. So we're reassessing at this point.
And we'll see the projects for this coming fiscal year will be in the budget document. I'm looking at Mr. Lawyer and getting an affirmative on that. Okay.
Yeah, we'll be, not only parks, but for all of our departments, putting together a 5-year plan, pulling 5-year numbers out from facility plans, water plans, park plans, pulling all those together.
Okay. So those will be all in the budget document, looking more than just the fiscal year, but taking that longer look out.
5 years. Yep.
Okay, 5 year, okay.
So moving on to the operating fund for the police, we are looking at a rate increase here. We've held off as long as we can in the initial few years. Unfortunately, this is going to be kind of a regular recurring basis at this point. We're looking at a monthly fee of about $7.94 per month. Again, this may change between now and when the budget document actually comes before you folks, though.
Okay. Councilor Cross?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm not sure who's going to be able to answer this question. I'm always going to be back the blue, like public safety is my number one. But I recently heard, I don't even know if this is right, it could be hearsay, that we have some frozen positions in Kaiser Police. So with this, let's back him, but if we're raising these fees, which I didn't know, one, is this true? And two, if we're approving these, I would think the public and myself, in good faith, I think that I would want all positions filled. Can you update me on that?
So we have had 3 positions frozen for, I think since about August. And Chief has made some adjustments with other vacancies to fill the uniformed positions. So we're down, we will be down 1 uniformed position after I just gave him the go-ahead last week to be able to go ahead and fill one of the other uniformed positions. So we're giving him the flexibility to make those movements around. When we say this fee is going up, that's ultimately, that's going to be in the hands of the budget committee and then the city council, so the staff can't raise it. That'll be the proposal.
Follow up?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I understand, and I know this is just a discussion. I guess,
Okay.
my main little concern or thought is that when, even last year, that we're approving as a group during the budget, my thought process is Copeland or Teague has a full force. So when or how is that communicated?
Yeah, we haven't changed the council-approved full-time equivalent numbers, the positions allocated, but like Mr. Wood said, throughout the year, we're managing the budget to make sure that we don't come back in the red. And so that means working within the positions that get vacated, and then being opportunistic about using, okay, if I've got a position I can't fill, which one am I better off with? So we're allowing chief to make those value judgments.
One more follow-up?
Just one more follow-up. So we decided in August, when the budget started in July, that we needed to cut that? Froze
Yeah.
it? Like we froze
Yes.
something, like 60 days into a budget?
It wasn't three positions at that once.
But we already froze a position that quickly?
It was a result of the collective bargaining. And so we didn't know where the money would come out with the collective bargaining. The collective bargaining was finished in the August timeframe. So
Alright.
that was the ultimate result of it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Christopher?
My pages are different. My page 26 says park, and my page 27 says police. So I want to talk about 26. I just want to know what is on the general operating fund for the park, line 10, what is capital outlay? What is that?
Well, that would be park improvements if we're doing any, could be park vehicles, those kind of things,
Playgrounds.
playground equipment.
So
Pickleball is one we're doing this year, 6 pickleball courts. And then I think next year we have Bob Newton Park getting upgrades, so.
okay. So that's going to be the work plan, right?
Correct.
Okay, so that parks will come to us and say, this is what I'm doing for 24, 25.
That is correct.
And it could be less or more than 300 grand.
Yes.
Okay, and what are the other revenues on line 4? What are the revenues?
The Parks Department has a couple rental houses. That's the biggest piece.
Thanks.
Okay. So that went back to parks, and then anything else on the police fund?
What's the capital outlay?
The capital outlay on police? So the question is, what's included in capital outlay generally for police?
Are those
Pol-
cars?
Police vehicles, yes.
Yeah. You gotta keep them rolling, right?
And like I indicated before, I wasn't anticipating we get through the whole presentation today. So we are at a convenient stopping point if you folks are interested in adjourning and picking up the rest of this at the next opportunity.
Yeah, I would agree, because then we're going into some of the public works like water systems and so forth, and we have time also on the next meeting to get into, also something that has just been in the last couple of years, and that's ARPA, the American,
Rescue.
say it again? American Rescue Plan Act. I've gotten so used to saying ARPA like it is a noun that you forget it stands for things. So we'll be hearing back on that. Unless there's objection from the group, I would agree with Mr. Wood that this is a good breaking point or recess point. Anything else that people would like to make sure that we hear about in 2 weeks? Some input for our staff members.
Madam Mayor,
Mr. Brown?
just want to, for the benefit of the whole long-range planning task force, what we want to do is give you the global picture of all the things that are making this year's budget complex. What's in this presentation is merely forecast mathematical exercises, but there are a lot of other things at play. And so that's what will be included next week after we wrap up these other two, the other couple funds, and including a strategy that I've talked with most of the council about, but this body hasn't heard it yet. So for decreasing some expenditures perpetually.
I'm sorry, for doing what?
Decreasing basically our PERS fund.
Oh,
Our PERS.
right, paying down our unfunded PERS liability. Yeah. So yes, there's definitely items in the works for that can help stabilize our general fund. And looking forward to bringing that information. All right. Anything else? All right, ladies and gentlemen, the time is 7:32. We are adjourned. Thank you all so much.